Doria Ragland gone to prison, which would suggest why she abandoned her daughter Meghan Markle.
And I think we were just hit so hard at the beginning with a lot of mistruths that I made the choice to not read anything.
The producers also said they would like her mother to show her how to cook something, and she...
For years, Meghan Markle carefully shaped the world's understanding of who she is. The story was always clean, simple, and emotional in the right places. She was the only daughter of Doria Ragland, raised by her, guided by her, supported by her through every chapter of life. That image has been repeated so many times, it feels untouchable. But what if that picture was never complete to begin with? Because lately, whispers have been creeping out of places Meghan never expected. Old California connections, quiet family circles, people who don't talk loudly, but who remember things very clearly. And what they're suggesting shakes the foundation of that carefully built story. They say that before Meghan was even born, Doria may have had another child, a daughter. A daughter the world was never told about. And when that possibility reportedly reached Meghan, sources say she didn't react the way you'd expect. No denial, no explanation, just silence. The same kind of silence her mother once gave her. Because if this is true, it doesn't just tweak Meghan's family history, it completely rewrites it. The question isn't just who this woman might be. It's why her existence would have been hidden for so long, and to understand that, you have to go back to the years when Doria Ragland vanished from view entirely. The years no one can fully explain. The moment a DNA test began pulling the past into the light, and the British writer whose story sounds far too familiar to ignore. Now, before we go any further, understand this. What you're about to hear involves matching DNA tests, identical phone call, and a story so specific it almost dares you to call it coincidence. This isn't loose gossip floating around with no anchors. The details line up too cleanly, too perfectly. Here's the thing. Doria Ragland is now photographed beside royalty. She attends global events. She's presented as one of the most dignified, grounded figures in Meghan's life. But there's a chunk of her past that doesn't add up at all. We're not talking about a few months of privacy. We're talking about years, full years. During some of the most important stages of Meghan's childhood, Doria simply disappears. No photos, no public appearances, no record, nothing. She goes completely off the radar. No trace of where she was or what she was doing. And in today's world, that doesn't just happen accidentally. Especially not for years at a time. Especially not when you're the mother of someone who would later become one of the most famous women on the planet. Think about it. Single mothers don't vanish. They show up in school photos, they leave paper trails, jobs, addresses, medical records. Something. Life forces you to exist visibly when you're raising a child. So when someone disappears that completely, you have to ask why.
With her. And she's not seen him in the latter years. More importantly, I mean, she's not just seen him, she's like totally snubbed him.
Some people will tell you the safe version, that Doria was just laying low, keeping a private life, trying to figure things out. But when you really sit with that explanation, it starts to fall apart, because privacy doesn't erase your existence, and it doesn't wipe out years of documentation. The whispers around those missing years aren't about modesty or wanting peace. They're about something deliberate, something hidden on purpose. It feels like those years were meant to be forgotten, scrubbed clean, removed entirely from the timeline, and maybe that would have worked. Maybe those gaps would have stayed buried forever if Meghan had lived a normal life. But when you marry into the most famous family on earth, nothing stays hidden. Cameras roll. People dig, and suddenly those missing years start screaming. What's strange is that when Doria finally reappears in Meghan's documented life, she never explains where she'd been. Not once. No stories, no casual mentions, no reflections, just silence, heavy silence, the kind that protects something. When people ask, the answers are vague, deflective, almost rehearsed. That's not how people talk when nothing happened. That's how people talk when the truth would change everything.
Very, very bad for both of them. Meghan, who screamed, "Don't leave me, don't leave me," and Harry, who actually...
When Meghan talks about her childhood, it sounds polished, almost too polished. A biracial girl raised by a strong single black mother in Los Angeles. A story of struggle, strength, and resilience. It's compelling, it builds a brand, and there's nothing wrong with a powerful origin story. But the problem is the details don't stay the same. Take her father, Thomas Markle. In some interviews, he's deeply involved, present, supportive. In others, he fades into the background entirely. Suddenly, it's just Meghan and Doria against the world. Two very different versions of the same childhood. And it doesn't stop there. Her education history raises questions too. Meghan has spoken about majoring in international relations and theater at Northwestern University. It sounds impressive, perfect even. But when people started checking the details, things didn't quite line up. The program she described didn't exist in that exact form at the time. Maybe it's a labeling issue. Maybe memories blur. But when these inconsistencies pile up, they stop looking random.
It takes so much courage to admit that you need help. It takes so much courage to voice.
What's interesting is how specific these inconsistencies are. They always align perfectly with the message she's trying to send at that moment. The narrative shifts just enough to stay compelling, sympathetic, and inspiring. Most people do this a little, but most people aren't building a global identity around it. Her entire public persona rests on these stories, and when the foundation keeps shifting, people start asking questions. Then 2021 happens. Meghan goes on her Archetypes podcast and drops a bombshell. She says she took a DNA test and discovered she's 43% Nigerian, not vaguely African, not West African. Exactly 43%. She's excited, emotional. She FaceTimes her mother to share the news, and then comes the pause. Doria doesn't react right away. There's silence, a long, heavy silence. And then she says 2 words, I know. At the time, people thought it was emotional. A touching mother-daughter moment. The internet loved it, quoted it, shared it. But looking back now, that pause feels different. It doesn't sound like surprise, it sounds like recognition, because 43% is an unusually specific number. DNA tests rarely land that cleanly. And here's the part nobody questioned at the time. That exact moment had already happened before, 4 years earlier, to someone else. A British writer named Georgina Alton. Her story, published in 2020, describes taking a DNA test, discovering she was 43% Nigerian, FaceTiming her mother, and experiencing the same long pause, the same careful response. The details are identical, not similar, identical. Same percentage, same method, same maternal reaction. That's not coincidence. And suddenly, Doria's pause doesn't sound emotional anymore. It sounds like someone recognizing a moment she's lived through before. A secret trying desperately not to surface. And when you connect that pause to the missing years, everything starts to feel heavier, because maybe those years weren't about privacy. Maybe they were about someone else, someone who had to stay hidden. And when you really sit with that idea, it becomes impossible to ignore how everything keeps circling back to Doria. Her silence, her absence, that pause. Because that FaceTime moment wasn't just awkward, it was loaded. It was the sound of someone realizing a door had almost been opened that was never supposed to be touched again. Think about it. When your child calls you excited, sharing something that feels life-changing, most mothers react instantly. Joy, surprise, curiosity, questions, emotion spills out naturally. But Doria didn't do that. She froze. And when she finally spoke, she chose her words with surgical care. I know, not that's amazing, not tell me more, just confirmation. That's not discovery. That's familiarity. And suddenly those missing years stop feeling random. They start feeling necessary. Because those years, the ones no one can trace, line up perfectly with a theory people have whispered about for decades, the idea that there may have been another child. A daughter born when Doria was completely off the radar. A child raised far away from Los Angeles, away from cameras, away from any connection that could be easily followed back. If that's true, everything clicks into place. The secrecy, the silence, the way those years were erased instead of explained. That's the kind of thing you don't talk about casually. That's the kind of truth you protect with your life. And then there's Georgina. Her story doesn't just echo Meghan's, it mirrors it. Right down to the emotional beats. Growing up feeling different, never quite fitting in. Knowing something was missing but not knowing what. Then the DNA test, the revelation, the call, the pause, the careful response on the other end of the line, the realization that your entire understanding of yourself was incomplete. Georgina processed it the way writers do. She wrote it all down. Raw, personal, painful. She published it. The world read it. The Guardian covered it. Literary circles talked about it. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't obscure. It was out there. And then a year later, Meghan tells the same story. Not inspired by it, not loosely similar, but structured almost exactly the same framing of identity, the same emotional rhythm, the same language of belonging and discovery, even the same number, 43%. At some point, coincidence stops being believable. And what makes it even more unsettling is Georgina's response, or lack of one. She didn't call Meghan out. she didn't accuse her. In fact, she defended her publicly, spoke about her bravery, her struggle, her voice. That silence is loud, because if Georgina ever said, "That's my story," everything would explode. Questions about authenticity, about borrowed identity, about whether Meghan's carefully curated narrative was built, at least in part, on someone else's lived experience. And maybe that's why Georgina stays quiet, because challenging someone with a royal platform comes at a cost. And maybe she just wants peace. But the similarities don't stop there. Both women describe identity the same way, as something fractured, something missing, something finally made whole through discovery. They don't just share details, they share structure. And storytelling structure doesn't accidentally align that closely. Then come the whispers that Meghan's team had read Georgina's book. That raceless was discussed behind closed doors. Whether as research, inspiration, or something more deliberate, no one can say for sure. But the timing alone raises eyebrows. Book in 2020, podcast story in 2021. Too neat, too convenient. And then Meghan decides to take this discovery public in the biggest way possible. A trip to Nigeria, a homecoming, a celebration of heritage, a moment meant to silence doubts. But instead, it does the opposite. From the moment she arrives, the disconnect is obvious. The way she presents herself, the lack of cultural understanding, the subtle criticism. Not hostility, but discomfort. Nigeria is welcoming, warm, but there's a difference between being a guest and claiming to come home. People expect reverence when you claim roots, knowledge, respect. And what they saw didn't match the story they've been told, then the DNA test becomes a topic of conversation. The very thing the entire trip is built on, and when asked to show it, she can't, doesn't have it. That alone raises questions. But when local experts offer to help trace her ancestry properly, real records, real lineage, she declines. She doesn't want to dig deeper. And suddenly, the narrative only works if no one looks too closely. The trip that was supposed to confirm her identity ends up magnifying doubt, and people start connecting dots they hadn't wanted to connect before. Between Georgina's story, Doria's pause, the missing years, the silence. Which brings us back to the two possibilities no one wants to say out loud. Either Doria had another daughter during those missing years, a daughter the world was never meant to know about, or Meghan adopted a story that wasn't originally hers because it fit the identity she needed to anchor herself to. Neither option is comfortable. Both raise serious questions about truth, identity, and what happens when personal narratives become brands. What we do know is this: two women, same DNA percentage, same phone call, same reaction, same emotional structure, same silence surrounding the truth. That's not random. And that pause on the FaceTime call, that wasn't emotion. That was calculation, protection. A split second of realizing how close everything came to unraveling. Because sometimes the loudest truth isn't spoken. It's hidden in the gaps. It's buried in missing years. And it's revealed in the moments where someone knows too much to react naturally.